Good evening. Now, when you hear the word dictator, you probably picture some cartoonishly evil figure from a black and white newsreel, maybe with a silly mustache and a penchant for overly dramatic speeches. You might think, surely in our modern, enlightened age of cat videos and avocado toast, we've moved past all that. But you would be spectacularly, depressingly wrong. The truth is, dictatorships are alive and well. They've just had a bit of a rebrand. They've swapped their military fatigues for sharp suits, their overt propaganda for sophisticated social media manipulation, and their iron fists now wear the silken glove of sham elections and hollow legal justifications. These are the modern autocrats, the strongmen, the presidents for life who cling to power with the tenacity of a toddler clinging to a toy they just stole from another child. They operate in a world that claims to value democracy, while often turning a blind eye to its systematic dismantling. They are masters of a grim performance art, projecting an image of stability and strength, while presiding over systems of breathtaking cruelty, corruption, and repression. And tonight we're going to pull back the curtain on this deeply unsettling stage show. So, buckle up, because we're going on a deeply dispiriting world tour. We'll be counting down the top 10 current dictators who are making life a living hell for their citizens. We'll look at who they are, the flags they wave while committing unspeakable acts, and the specific atrocities that should keep us all up at night. It's not going to be fun, it's not going to be pretty, but it is absolutely essential that we pay attention. Let's get into it. We begin our grim countdown in Nicaragua, a country whose recent history is a tragic story of a dream deferred and then actively strangled. And the man holding the pillow over its face is Daniel Ortega. Now, for those of you who remember the 80s, the name Ortega might ring a bell. He was a leader of the Sandinista revolution, a guerrilla fighter who helped overthrow a brutal dictator. He was, for a time, a symbol of hope, which makes his current role as a brutal dictator himself not just terrible, but exquisitely ironic, like a firefighter who becomes a serial arsonist. After losing power in 1990, Ortega spent years in the political wilderness before clawing his way back to the presidency in 2007. And since then, he has systematically dismantled every democratic institution in his path. He packed the courts with loyalists, eliminated presidential term limits, a classic dictator move, right up there with giant, unsettling portraits of yourself, and turned the national police and military into his own personal goon squad. He's essentially taken the country's democratic machinery and repurposed it into a grotesque sculpture of his own ego. His wife, Rosario Murillo, is the vice president, making Nicaragua less a republic and more a deeply dysfunctional family business. This power couple has responded to any and all dissent with astonishing brutality. In 2018, when students and ordinary citizens took to the streets to protest social security cuts, Ortega's response wasn't dialogue. It was live ammunition. Government-backed paramilitary groups known as Turbas unleashed a wave of terror, resulting in hundreds of deaths, thousands of injuries, and a mass exodus of citizens. The regime's playbook is as predictable as it is vicious. They target anyone who dares to speak out. Journalists are imprisoned, opposition candidates are arrested before they can even run in the sham elections, and NGOs are shut down. They've even gone after the Catholic Church, arresting priests and bishops who offered sanctuary to protesters. It's a comprehensive campaign of repression designed to create a state of permanent fear, turning a nation once filled with revolutionary fervor into a silent prison. So here we are. Daniel Ortega, the former revolutionary hero, now presides over a police state built on fear and violence. He has jailed, exiled, or killed his opponents, turning the promise of a free Nicaragua into a cruel joke. He's a walking, talking cautionary tale about how easily the liberator can become the oppressor, especially when they develop a taste for absolute power and really don't want to leave the house. Next, we travel to Venezuela, a nation sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, which, under its current leadership, is like giving the keys to a Bugatti to a man who thinks the gas pedal is a suggestion and traffic laws are for other people. That man is Nicolas Maduro. A former bus driver and union leader, Maduro was the hand-picked successor to the charismatic and controversial Hugo Chavez. But where Chavez had a certain populist charm, Maduro has all the charisma of a DMV employee at the end of a long Friday. Since taking power in 2013, Maduro has overseen a crisis so catastrophic it's almost hard to comprehend. Venezuela has experienced one of the worst economic collapses in modern history outside of a war. We're talking hyperinflation so extreme that the currency became effectively worthless, leading to scenes of people using stacks of bolivars as napkins or for arts and crafts, which is a bleakly creative response to your life savings becoming literal garbage. Basic necessities like food, medicine, and electricity became luxuries. Maduro's response to this self-inflicted disaster has been to double down on authoritarianism. He created a parallel legislature, the Constituent Assembly, to sideline the opposition-controlled National Assembly. He's held elections that were widely condemned as fraudulent, with key opposition leaders banned from running or in jail. He maintains his grip on power through loyalty within the military, which he has rewarded with control over key sectors of the economy, including food distribution and mining, creating a deeply corrupt system where the powerful get rich while the population starves. The human cost of this is staggering. The United Nations estimates that over 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country, creating one of the largest displacement crises in the world. Inside Venezuela, human rights abuses are rampant. Security forces, including the notorious Special Action Forces, or FAs, have been implicated in thousands of extrajudicial killings, particularly in poor neighborhoods. Arbitrary detention, torture, and forced disappearances of political opponents are commonplace. It's a systematic campaign of terror designed to crush dissent. So, Nicolás Maduro, the man who was supposed to continue the Bolivarian revolution, has instead driven his country straight into a ditch. He clings to power while his people suffer unimaginably, presiding over a humanitarian and economic catastrophe of his own making. He is a potent symbol of what happens when ideology, incompetence, and a complete disregard for human life collide in a perfect storm of failure. He's not just a bad leader, he's a national disaster in a tracksuit. Alright, let's move on to a man who hardly needs an introduction. A dictator so cartoonishly evil he makes Bond villains look nuanced and reasonable. I'm talking, of course, about Kim Jong-un of North Korea. He inherited the family business of totalitarianism from his father and grandfather, making the Kim dynasty the world's only communist hereditary dictatorship. It's a political system that combines the worst aspects of Stalinism with the worst aspects of a monarchy, which is a truly cursed combination, like mixing bleach and ammonia. Under Kim Jong-un, North Korea remains what it has been for decades: a hermit kingdom, a giant open-air prison sealed off from the rest of the world. The state's control over its citizens is absolute and terrifying. Every aspect of life is dictated by the regime, from where you live and what job you do, to what you are allowed to think. The personality cult surrounding the Kim family is all-encompassing. Their portraits are in every home and building, and any disrespect, perceived or real, can land you and your entire family in a political prison camp. And let's talk about those camps, the Kwanliso. They are the horrifying centerpiece of Kim's rule. Human rights organizations estimate that tens of thousands of people are subjected to forced labor, starvation, torture, and execution in these camps. These aren't just prisons, they are places designed to slowly and systematically destroy human beings. The stories that have emerged from defectors are the stuff of nightmares, detailing a level of cruelty that is difficult for a sane mind to process. Beyond the camps, the entire population lives under the constant threat of starvation and repression. While Kim Jong-un spends vast sums of money on developing nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles and lives a life of decadent luxury, his people frequently face severe food shortages. The state's songbun system, a rigid social caste system, determines the fate of every citizen based on their family's perceived loyalty to the regime. If your grandfather was on the wrong side of the Korean War, you are permanently screwed. Kim Jong-un projects an image of strength and modernity, meeting with world leaders and promoting ski resorts, but this is just a paper-thin facade over a monstrous reality. He is the warden of a nation-sized gulag, a man who will execute his own uncle with an anti-aircraft gun and allegedly have his half-brother assassinated with a nerve agent in a Malaysian airport. He is the undisputed king of a kingdom built on fear, lies, and unimaginable human suffering. Our next stop is Syria, a country that for the last decade has been, honestly, synonymous with war, destruction, and a level of human suffering that is almost biblical in scale. And at the heart of this apocalypse is one man, Bashar al-Assad. Like Kim Jong-un, Assad is another second-generation dictator. He's an ophthalmologist by training, which is deeply ironic for a man who has so completely blinded himself to the humanity of his own people. He was once hailed as a potential reformer, a modernizer who would open up Syria. That, it's fair to say, did not pan out. When the Arab Spring protests reached Syria in 2011, Assad's response was not reform, it was bullets. Peaceful demonstrators were met with lethal force, and the country quickly descended into a brutal and complex civil war. What followed was, well, a masterclass in autocratic brutality. Assad's regime has been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of its own citizens. Entire cities, like Aleppo and Homs, have been reduced to rubble by indiscriminate bombing campaigns carried out by Syrian and Russian air forces. Assad's forces have systematically used starvation as a weapon of war, laying siege to opposition-held areas and preventing food and medicine from reaching civilians. But his regime's most infamous atrocity is its repeated use of chemical weapons against its own people. Despite international outrage and supposed agreements to dismantle his chemical arsenal, Assad's forces have deployed chlorine gas and even the deadly nerve agent sarin on civilian populations, including women and children. It is a war crime of the highest order, a line that even many of the world's worst tyrants hesitate to cross. The regime's dungeons are another circle of hell. Tens of thousands of Syrians have been arbitrarily detained, where they face systematic torture, sexual violence, and summary execution. The Caesar photos, smuggled out by a military defector, showed the world the emaciated and brutalized bodies of thousands of detainees, providing undeniable evidence of the industrial scale of the regime's killing machine. It's a system of extermination masquerading as a justice system. Today, with the help of his Russian and Iranian allies, Assad has clawed back control over most of the country, but he rules over a shattered nation, a land of mass graves and displaced people. He has won his war by destroying his country and brutalizing his population into submission. Bashar al-Assad is not a president. He is a mass murderer who has clung to power by wading through a river of his own people's blood. He is a man who looked at his country and decided he would rather rule over its ashes than let it go. We now turn to a man who proudly holds the title of Europe's last dictator, a label he seems to wear with the same kind of defiant pride a toddler wears a spaghetti-stained shirt. This is Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus. A former collective farm manager, Lukashenko has ruled the country with an iron fist since 1994, making him the longest-serving head of state in Europe. He has cultivated a bizarre, folksy strongman persona, often appearing in military uniform or, dispensing unsolicited advice on farming, all while running a state that feels like a Soviet theme park that nobody is allowed to leave. Lukashenko's Belarus is a country frozen in time. The state controls about 80% of the economy, the secret police are still called the KGB, and political dissent is not just discouraged, it's treated as a form of treason. For years, he maintained a grim sort of stability through a combination of Russian subsidies and a relentless crackdown on any form of opposition. Elections are held, but they are pure political theater, with the outcome never in doubt. It's like a magic show where the magician tells you exactly how he's going to rig the trick and then does it anyway. Things came to a dramatic head in 2020. After Lukashenko brazenly stole yet another presidential election, the Belarusian people had finally had enough. Hundreds of thousands took to the streets in the largest protests the country had ever seen. The regime's response was swift and savage. Riot police, or OMON, unleashed a campaign of terror, arresting tens of thousands of people. Protesters were beaten, tortured, and subjected to horrific abuse in detention centers. The stories that emerged were sickening, detailing a deliberate policy of humiliation and pain. Lukashenko's desperation to crush dissent has led to some truly audacious acts of state-sponsored thuggery. In 2021, his government forced a Ryanair flight traveling between 2 EU countries to land in Minsk. Also, they could arrest a single dissident journalist who was on board. It was an act of air piracy, a stunning violation of international norms that showed the world he would stop at nothing to silence his critics. He's also weaponized migrants, luring them to Belarus and then forcing them across the border into Poland and Lithuania to to create a crisis for the EU. Alexander Lukashenko is a paranoid and brutal ruler, clinging to power with the backing of his security forces and his chief enabler, Vladimir Putin. He has turned his country into a pariah state, jailing thousands of political prisoners and forcing his brightest citizens into exile. He is a thuggish relic of a bygone era, a man whose desperate and violent attempts to stay in power have revealed him to be not a strong man, but a deeply insecure tyrant terrified of his own people. Moving on to Egypt, a country whose hopes for democracy during the 2011 Arab Spring were tragically short-lived, thanks in large part to our next entry, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. A career military man and former head of military intelligence, Sisi came to power in 2013 by leading a military coup against Egypt's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi. He then traded his military uniform for a civilian suit, won a couple of elections in which he faced no meaningful opposition, and proceeded to establish what many human rights groups call the most repressive government in Egypt's modern history. That is a very high bar, and Sisi has cleared it with room to spare. His rule has been defined by a crackdown on all forms of dissent that is honestly breathtaking in its scope and brutality. The first sign of what was to come was the Rabaa massacre in August 2013, where security forces killed at least 1,000 people, mostly supporters of the deposed president, in a single day. Human Rights Watch called it one of the world's largest killings of demonstrators in a single day in recent history. It was a clear and bloody message. Opposition will not be tolerated. Since then, Sisi's regime has effectively criminalized freedom of expression. Tens of thousands of people are estimated to have been arrested for political reasons. The list of detainees includes not just Islamist opponents, but secular activists, journalists, lawyers, academics, artists, and even social media influencers who posted the wrong video. Egypt's prisons are overflowing with horrific conditions, systematic torture, and the denial of medical care being common tactics used to break the will of prisoners. The regime has also completely dismantled the free press. Most independent media outlets have been shut down or taken over by companies linked to the intelligence services. Egypt is now one of the world's biggest jailers of journalists. The legal system has also been co-opted, with mass trials and military courts used to hand down harsh sentences, including the death penalty, to civilians. Sisi has amended the constitution to allow himself to stay in power until at least 2030, cementing his one-man rule. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi presents himself to the world as a bulwark against terrorism and a pillar of stability in a turbulent region. And many Western governments, frankly, have bought into this narrative, continuing to provide him with billions in military and economic aid. But the stability he offers is the stability of a graveyard. It is a peace enforced by secret police, torture chambers, and the ever-present fear of disappearance. He has crushed a generation's democratic aspirations under the heel of his military boot. We now journey to the Horn of Africa, to a country so repressive and isolated it's often called the North Korea of Africa. Welcome to Eritrea, ruled since its formal independence in 1993 by one man, Isaias Afwerki. Like Daniel Ortega, Afwerki was a celebrated rebel leader who led his people through a grueling 30-year war for independence from Ethiopia. He was, a symbol of hope and liberation. And also like Ortega, he has since become the very thing he fought against: a ruthless, paranoid tyrant. Eritrea under Afwerki is a country in a state of suspended animation. The constitution, ratified in 1997, has never been implemented. There have been no national elections ever. There is no legislature, no independent judiciary, and no free press. The state controls all media. It is, in the purest sense of the term, a one-man dictatorship. Afwerki rules by decree, his whims becoming the law of the land, his paranoia shaping the fate of millions. The defining feature of life in Eritrea is the system of indefinite national service. Officially, all citizens are required to serve 18 months in the military or civil service. In reality, though, this service has become a form of modern-day slavery. Conscripts are forced to serve for years, often decades, for minuscule pay, working on military-owned farms or construction projects. This system has hollowed out the country, forcing hundreds of thousands of young Eritreans to flee. undertaking perilous journeys across deserts and seas to escape a lifetime of forced labor. Dissent is not an option in Afwerki's Eritrea. In 2001, a group of senior government officials, his former comrades in arms, published an open letter calling for democratic reforms. Afwerki's response was to arrest them all, along with every independent journalist in the country. None of them have been seen or heard from since. They are the disappeared, languishing in a secret network of prisons where torture and inhumane conditions are the norm. It's a country where you can be imprisoned for asking the wrong question. More recently, Afwerki's malign influence has spilled across borders. He sent his highly militarized army into Ethiopia's Tigray region, where Eritrean soldiers have been accused of committing some of the war's worst atrocities, including massacres of civilians, systematic looting, and widespread sexual violence. Isaias Afwerki has not only turned his own country into a giant prison camp, but he has also exported his brand of brutality abroad. He is, frankly, a reclusive, cruel dictator who has stolen his nation's future. Our next dictator is a man who has perfected the art of ruling by not ruling at all. Meet Paul Biya of Cameroon, who at nearly 90 years old is the world's oldest head of state and the second longest ruling non-royal leader. He has been in power since 1982. To put that in perspective, when he became president, the internet didn't exist, the Soviet Union was still a thing, and the top-grossing movie was E.T. He has outlasted everyone and everything, ruling his country with a mixture of brute force, political cunning, and honestly, long, luxurious stays in a 5-star hotel in Geneva. Biya's rule is often described as a form of governance by inertia. He is famous for his absenteeism, spending months at a time out of the country, primarily at the Intercontinental Hotel in Geneva, costing his impoverished nation millions of dollars. He governs through a small, deeply entrenched clique of loyalists who enrich themselves while the country's infrastructure crumbles and its people suffer. It's less a government and more a criminal syndicate with a flag. For decades, Biya maintained his grip by skillfully playing different ethnic and regional groups against each other and using his security forces to crush any serious opposition. Elections are a predictable farce, marred by allegations of fraud and voter suppression. But in recent years, his long, stagnant rule has plunged the country into multiple crises, most notably the Anglophone crisis. This conflict began with peaceful protests by the country's English-speaking minority against marginalization, but has since escalated into a brutal civil war. The government's response to the crisis has been horrifically violent. Security forces have been implicated in extrajudicial killings, burning villages, and widespread human rights abuses against civilians in the Anglophone regions. Separatist groups have also committed terrible atrocities, creating a spiral of violence that has killed thousands and displaced over 500,000 people. It's a conflict born from decades of neglect and arrogance, which has now metastasized into a national tragedy. Paul Biya is the ultimate embodiment of a leader who has long overstayed his welcome. He treats Cameroon not as a nation to be governed, but as a personal estate to be plundered. His legacy will be one of stagnation, corruption, and a brutal, needless conflict that has torn his country apart. He is a ghost president, haunting his own nation from a Swiss hotel room, while his people pay the price in blood and treasure for his seemingly endless reign. Let's head to Uganda, a nation led by another former rebel leader who promised a fundamental change, and then fundamentally decided he liked power way too much to ever give it up. This is Yoweri Museveni, who seized power in 1986 and hasn't left since. For a long time, Museveni was a darling of the West, praised for bringing stability and overseeing economic growth after the brutal reigns of Idi Amin and Milton Obote. He was seen as part of a new generation of African leaders. Well, that generation is now old, and the fundamental change looks a lot like the same old story of a leader refusing to leave the stage. Museveni's rule, now approaching its 4th decade, has become increasingly authoritarian. He has repeatedly manipulated the constitution to remove presidential age and term limits, effectively making himself president for life. Each successive election has been more contested and more violent than the last, with his opponents facing harassment, intimidation, and arrest. Museveni's main rival in recent years has been the pop star turned politician Bobi Wine, whose youthful energy and message of change have galvanized Uganda's overwhelmingly young population. The state's response to this political challenge has been utterly brutal. Security forces have repeatedly arrested Wine, raided his offices, and violently dispersed his rallies. In the run-up to the 2021 election, security forces shot and killed dozens of opposition supporters during protests, and hundreds more were abducted by plainclothed operatives in unmarked vans, a practice known as being disappeared. Beneath the surface of supposed stability, Museveni's regime is characterized by rampant corruption and a powerful, unaccountable security apparatus that acts with impunity. The police and military are frequently used to crush dissent, break up protests, and silence critical voices. Journalists who report on sensitive issues like corruption or human rights abuses face threats and arrest. It's a system designed to protect the power of one man and his inner circle, at the expense of the democratic rights of 45 million Ugandans. Yoweri Museveni, the man who once criticized African leaders who want to overstay in power, has become the very thing he claimed to despise. He has traded his revolutionary credentials for a crown, his promises of freedom for the truncheon of a police state. He presides over a system where the youth are silenced, the opposition is brutalized, and the hope for a peaceful transfer of power seems more distant than ever. He is a stark reminder that a long stay in power doesn't make you a statesman, it just makes you a dictator. And so we arrive at our number one spot, and I know what you might be thinking. After a list of mass-murdering, country-crashing, gulag-building strongmen, this choice might seem surprising. We're going to Tanzania, and our final entry is its current president, Samia Suluhu Hassan. She came to power in 2021 after the death of her notoriously autocratic predecessor, John Magufuli, and was initially hailed as a breath of fresh air. A calm, thoughtful woman taking over from a belligerent, science-denying populist. What could possibly go wrong? Well, this is where the story of modern authoritarianism gets complicated. Hassan, known as Mama Samia, immediately struck a different tone. She reversed some of Magufuli's most damaging policies, particularly on COVID-19, and reached out to the political opposition, even lifting a ban on opposition rallies. For a moment, it seemed like Tanzania was genuinely stepping back from the brink of full-blown dictatorship. The international community breathed a collective sigh of relief. But here's the thing about authoritarian systems. They are very, very hard to dismantle, especially from the top. Despite the initial positive steps, the underlying structures of repression built by Magufuli remain firmly in place. Draconian laws restricting freedom of the press and expression are still on the books and are still being used. Journalists and critics of the government continue to face harassment and arrest. The leader of the main opposition party, Freeman Mbowe, was arrested on terrorism charges shortly after Hassan took office, in a case that was widely seen as politically motivated. While he was eventually released, the message was clear: there are still red lines you do not cross. Furthermore, there have been disturbing reports of human rights abuses, particularly related to major development projects. The government is pushing ahead with the construction of a massive national park in the ancestral lands of the Maasai people, leading to forced evictions, violence, and the destruction of homes by security forces. This is happening on her watch. The state apparatus that was perfected for repression is still being used, just perhaps with a softer public face. So why is she number one on this list? Because she represents the most insidious and, perhaps, the most modern form of authoritarianism. It's not the cartoonish evil of a Kim Jong-un, but a dictatorship light. A smiling, reasonable autocracy that allows just enough freedom to keep the international community happy, while systematically crushing any real challenge to its power. It's the velvet glove approach. And that, in a way, is more dangerous, because it's easier to ignore. It lulls you into a false sense of security, making you believe things are getting better when the foundations of tyranny are actually being reinforced. Hassan's Tanzania is a critical test case. Will the promise of reform be fulfilled? Or will it just be a kinder, gentler, but no less firm continuation of one-party rule? The early signs are, to be frank, deeply worrying. So there you have it. A whirlwind tour of 10 countries held hostage by 10 individuals. From the overt brutality of Assad and Afwerki to the creeping procedural authoritarianism of Hassan, the face of modern dictatorship is varied. But the result is always the same: stolen futures, shattered lives, and nations crippled by fear and corruption. These leaders don't just destroy their country's economies or their democratic institutions. They inflict a deep spiritual wound, fostering cynicism and despair, and teaching their citizens that power is the only thing that matters, and that it comes, always, from the barrel of a gun or the stroke of a censor's pen. The impact of these regimes is devastating. They create waves of refugees that destabilize entire regions. They foster corruption that hollows out their nations from the inside. They silence the artists, the thinkers, the innovators, and the dreamers, the very people any healthy society needs to thrive. They rule over populations that are not living, but merely surviving. And while it's easy for us, watching from the comfort of our homes, to feel distant from these horrors, their actions have global consequences, and their disregard for human dignity is an affront to us all. It is absolutely vital that we don't look away. It's tempting to tune out this litany of awfulness, but apathy is the dictator's best friend. Stay informed. Read the reports from organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. Support the brave local journalists and activists who risk their lives to tell these stories. Demand that our own governments prioritize human rights over cynical self-interest in their foreign policy. The fight for democracy and human dignity is a global one, and it is being waged every single day by ordinary people in these countries. The very least we can do is bear witness and lend them our voice. Thank you, and good night.